His Excellency President Akufo-Addo, I say welcome Akwa to the second day of the African Export-Import Bank Annual Meetings. We in Ghana consider it an honor and a privilege to host this milestone event to celebrate and reflect on 30 years of remarkable progress by our Afreximbank. Our aspirations must be to build on a deeper sense of shared responsibility and ensure our institutions are supported enough to crowd in trillions of dollars worth of financing into Africa. Indeed, with a mandate that combines social, economic, financial, and environmental goals under the guidance of Professor Rama, we can contribute an incredible amount of work toward our collective goal of achieving a prosperous Africa within the next 30 years of the bank's existence. In 1961, Korea's GDP was $82 per capita, and 60 years later, 2022, it was 33,400. We have 30 years to eclipse this achievement for our 1.3 billion people. In essence, our ambition must be to ensure that we position our bank as a bridge extending forward so that our people can walk across a place where they have a better sense of agency about the course of their lives. Ladies and gentlemen, as we contemplate the effects of the recent poly-crisis and deliberate on the future of our Exim Bank, it is increasingly clear that now is the moment of fierce urgency to deliver on our bank's vision of building prosperity and improving the fortunes of 1.4 billion lives on our continent. A continent that by 2050 will have a quarter of the world's population, some 800 million youth, and hopefully a 16 trillion economy as AFCFTA foresees it. Setbacks will be inevitable on this journey. Yes, as anyone who has ever tried to change anything will tell you, it is difficult, not the easy. It is the difficult, not the easy, that imbues our souls with the kind of success that sustains. In the works of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, let me quote, "The task ahead is great indeed, and heavy is the responsibility." And yet it is a noble and glorious challenge, a challenge which calls for the courage to dream, the courage to believe, the courage to dare, the courage to do, the courage to envision, the courage to fight, the courage to work, the courage to achieve. Dare we ask for more at this auspicious time. We must reinstate our common humanity on the global platform.
From the seed of Pan-Africanism came the fruit of a specialized Pan-African financial institution dedicated to transforming Africa's trade, and thus Afreximbank was born. Now, 30 years on, we continue to champion Pan-African ideals. We are delivering the vision. We are building prosperity for Africans. We have taken inspiration from the action plan of the Organization of African Unity at its inception in 1963 to deliver a Pan-African payment and clearing union, to ease the movement of Africa's goods and services across borders, and to use Pan-African trade fairs to promote Africa's products and services across the continent and worldwide. We have constantly lived a Pan-African dream, standing by and with Africans in good and bad times, in times of strife and in times of crises, from pandemics to commodity prices shocks, from climate crisis to financial turmoil, in times of war and in eras of boom. And today, we are a stalwart supporter of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We have proved the naysayers wrong by building a preeminent export-import bank on the continent of Africa, by constantly innovating to diversify and accelerate Africa's trade, becoming a bridge that reconnects brothers and sisters in Africa, the Caribbean, and with Africa's diaspora, leveraging innovation and creativity to overcome challenges and create opportunities. We recognize the critical importance of industrialization to Africa's economic transformation. We are building pathways and infrastructure to drive export development and help transition away from commodity dependence. We are devising new ways to access our markets, build supply chains, and provide trade and investment information to unlock growth opportunities. And now, in 2023, we are proud to come together to celebrate our commitment to Africa, to help empower its development in the spirit of Pan-Africanism. We remain steadfast in our dedication to excellence. Truly, we are delivering the vision to transform Africa's trade. Truly, for today and tomorrow, we are building prosperity for Africans. Delivering the vision, building prosperity for Africans.
30 years on, the jury is in, and there could be no better place to celebrate our collective achievements than the birthplace of the champion of Pan-Africanism, the late Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. There were challenges, there have been difficulties, but today is a day for us to sing our praises. And it is in that context and with great joy that I welcome Your Excellencies, Honorable Prime Ministers, and distinguished guests to Accra. It is highly appreciated that you found the time for your very busy schedules to join us here today. This is clear evidence of the value each of you places on your bank. Special thanks to CARICOM leaders who traveled across the oceans to be here. Prime Ministers Davis, Motley, and Gonzalez. This is an indication that we are finally determined to have one homeland, to redraw the map of the world, to unveil a new continent, the Afro-Caribbean continent. That will extend from Mauritius in the east to the Bahamas in the west. That is what it has to be. And together we pave the way for global Africa to speak with one voice, with dignity and pride. On this auspicious occasion, we pay special tribute to the late Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the pioneer president of Ghana, whose ideals and vision are as relevant today as they were when he first espoused them decades ago. We celebrate a man whose convictions form the plank on which Afreximbank stands. For 60 years, this well-articulated roadmap remained a map and gathered dust. But thanks to the vision of African leaders who founded Afreximbank 30 years ago, one by one, they are being delivered within the framework of Team Africa, comprising the African Union and its agencies, the FCFTA Secretariat, and the Afreximbank as the underpinning banker. So today, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System is up and running, which will save the continent $5 billion in intra-African transfer charges. It will also expedite and enable payments for intra-African trade in African currencies.
Is the medium of exchange. The barriers to easy payments and settlements across borders within our continent are simply unsustainable. Let me give you an example. Traders from Djibouti selling to Kenya, or traders from Kenya selling to Djibouti, have to look for US dollars. How is US dollars part of the trade between Djibouti and Kenya? Why? And we are saying that today Afreximbank have given us a mechanism where traders in our continent can trade in their goods and services, and the Afreximbank will settle payments in local currency. That is why Kenya champions the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System that is done by our own institution, the Afreximbank. Why, members? Why is it necessary for us to buy things from Djibouti and pay in dollars? Why? There is no reason. And we are not against the US dollar. We just want to trade much more freely. Let us pay in US dollars what we are buying from the US. But what we are buying from Djibouti, let's use local currency.
The third is the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, a payment infrastructure provider that promotes cross-border payments for goods and services in Africa's 42 currencies. The other one is the Afreximbank Customer Due Diligence Repository Platform, which we also call the MANSA platform, that is helping us deal with the challenge of compliance. It is the centralized platform for customer due diligence for the continent as adopted by the Association of African Central Banks. The next is the Afreximbank Project Preparation Fund, which is helping us deal with the funding constraints to the preparation of bankable strategic projects. This fund has since creation just a few years ago been able to develop projects worth just under $4 billion. The next is the Africa Credit Opportunity Fund, a credit fund that supports trade growth in Africa by helping us complement the kind of credit Afreximbank is not able to do. And the next is the African Medical Center of Excellence, a center of excellence we are using to support the development of health infrastructure at the quaternary level. The first project is well underway in Nigeria and is being developed with King's College London and Christie's Oncology Center in Manchester. And finally, the Africa Quality Assurance Center, to ensure that made in Africa goods meet the required health and safety standards in African and global markets. Before I close, permit me to remind us that although we celebrate 30 years today, the journey to the next 30 years will require that we win the battle against those who are doing everything to weaken African multilateral institutions. We must say no to them and ensure we do not become willing tools in destroying what Africa's pioneer leaders toiled to build. It's also a day like this that we must remember the vision, courage, and hard work of the architect of our Afreximbank project, the late Dr. Babakar Ndiaye. May his soul rest in peace. Also present here are many of the bank's pioneer staff and persons who crafted the foundation documents for the establishment of the bank. While I'm unable to mention your names individually due to time, I do know that your work has been engraved in the history books of the bank, which we are making sure is written and written well. We, the African people, remain indebted to you, including to those who have left this world, especially our former colleagues, Mr. John Washington Otieno and Mr. Philip Kamau. May their souls rest in peace. Special thanks to our partner institutions, partner DFIs both in Africa and abroad, the African Development Bank, AFC, TDB, BUAD, ABID, Africa Trade Insurance Agency, and others, for being strong partners, making it possible that for us to jointly develop what we all believe in. And in a special way, I extend our utmost gratitude once again to His Excellency, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, his government and the people of Ghana for the warm hospitality and strong partnership with the bank, and particularly for hosting Afreximbank's 30th anniversary celebration. Mr. President, I recall, tried to meet you, to broach this idea with you. We couldn't get to meet, and I called you on the phone. You didn't even hesitate to tell me, just go ahead. Thank you very much for your trust and confidence.
Today we come conscious, therefore, that we were not the first to make this journey of Pan-Africanism, and that there has been a century of effort. I start here because in a world that is so clued in on instantaneous gratification, that it is important to set context and to understand the mission ahead of us. And that is why this morning is special. The context, as so appropriately enunciated by the fathers of this institution, that without the ability to bring prosperity to our people, we will not succeed. And that prosperity comes through growth, and growth comes through enhanced trade and opportunities for ordinary people. Perspective, because we live in a world where the existential crises threaten our individual and collective demise, such that if we don't come together to stay together, we cannot survive the battles of this century. I want, at the outset, to salute and thank Professor Benedict Orama, who is an outstanding visionary and who appreciated that Africa's reach must not simply be that on the continent, but that the tangible expression of integrating the daughters and sons of Africa from the diaspora, and in this particular instance, the Caribbean, is a critical part of the journey of being able to forge a clear and definite future of prosperity for our people. And I therefore look forward to my brothers and sisters coming together, recognizing that while each of us may not have the capacity to do all that we would like to do, we have the ability to pool together to secure that advantage. The Afreximbank, the Africa Development Bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, the CARICOM Development Fund have a duty to work with us all, to ensure that whatever is necessary to make both the financial and economic case of connectivity is put in place, because the next major step of cementing this relationship is not about leaders coming and mixing with other leaders, but it is about ordinary people moving in their own time and space to be able to make those friends, to make new family, and to make new business. When that happens, we will not even know the bounty that shall be created, because there is an organic nature in which the creativity and the abundance of our people shall allow for things to happen and to be created that we can't even contemplate today. But separate from that, there's the issue of functional cooperation. And the functional cooperation, as we are seeing, with the commitment of CARICOM to be able to participate through our central bank governors in the payment system, payment and settlement system, PAPS, recognizing that if we use that same system, we can minimize the extent to which trading in hard currency can limit the opportunities for our people, even within the Caribbean region, even within the African Union, but more importantly, across the Atlantic Ocean with each other. Being able to meet the true needs of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, which established the Caribbean Community. The Treaty of Chaguaramas, which established the Caribbean Community, and the revised treaty, which established the single market and single economy. In that revised treaty, Prime Minister Gonzalez, my dear brother, an elder statesman of the Caribbean civilization, speaks often about the fact that in a single market there are winners and there are losers. And one of the great geniuses of that arrangement we created was the fact that it recognizes that disadvantaged countries, disadvantaged sectors, and disadvantaged regions must not be forgotten. The CARICOM Development Fund, therefore, was the mechanism that was established to level the development that was necessary for all to benefit from our own free trade area in the Caribbean community. Its capacity to do so has been limited in the past by the contributions of small countries, its members. This opportunity, as a shareholder of the Afreximbank, excites us as to the possibilities of finding mechanisms to unlock the significant savings base of the Caribbean community, such that we can put financial instruments that are innovative to allow our own people to help finance our own development rather than simply waiting for others to bring money to help us. I am not sure that others will appreciate the significance of this moment. But while we fight among ourselves to raise 200 million, we can seek to go after some of those savings. And if we just get 1% of what is available in our banking system, both through financial and non-financial deposits, that will be in excess of $1 billion US. What is missing was the courage of an institution to work with us to unlock these savings. This is why this is an emotional moment for me and my colleagues today. We have come to Accra, Ghana, not because we have simply come home to celebrate the homeland, but we have come to Accra, Ghana, confident that the things we shall do here and the agreements we shall make here are part of a continuum that we have started in the last year with the Afreximbank to be able to see how truly we can make a defining difference to the lives of our people. These things will not happen by accident. And when we spoke of the first Caribbean Trade Investment Forum a year ago, others didn't believe that it would be possible. And yet we met in Barbados at the end of August, early September, to host that first Trade and Investment Forum. I look forward to when we will meet later this year in Guyana to do the same, because it is the bridges that we are building that will create the opportunities that our people need. You know, when we saw the holograph, and we, especially for me, who was not born until 1965, could sit in a room with the father of the post-independence world of Africa and the Caribbean, and hear the voice and the words of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, it was also a special moment. His commitment and his life's journey is a lesson for us all on this journey. That even those who were revered have the capacity to be distracted and taken down by those whose vision is too narrow and too limited. But that ultimately, the noble causes that we fight for will always rise because they are universal and they are perennial. I leave, therefore, this morning, this stage, confident that that which has brought us to Accra is a noble and veritable cause. It was expressed by Bob Marley in that great song, Africa Unite, as we're moving right out of Babylon and we're moving into the fatherland, or should I say, the motherland. My friends, this conference is not just simply about words. The genius of this conference is that it has been about action. Let us all, to the occasion, now apply the will that is necessary to close the gap and to recognize from the example of Dr. Nkrumah's life that it is not always a straight line, but that we shall always remain focused, because that cause for which we fight is a necessary and a just cause for the liberation and for the improvement of the lives of the people of Africa, wherever the people of Africa are found on the planet Earth. Thank you, and God bless.
I'll begin by really riding on the salutations which were made earlier by the previous speakers, and greet all their excellencies and all of you who are here. The African Union is a strong supporter of African Union financial institutions. Way back in 1963, when the Organization of African Unity was created, one of the first decisions was on the establishment of the African Development Bank. And 1 year later, it was up and running. And it's a growing and resilient institution. From time to time, the Pan-African financial institutions have sought recapitalization, and they come to the African Union to ask for policy decisions in support of the request for capital increase, and that has been facilitated. We've done so in respect of the African Development Bank, and we've also done so in respect of the African Export-Import Bank. In addition to that, some of the Pan-African financial institutions have sought to be specialized agencies of the African Union, self-financing specialized agencies of the African Union. And right now, there are two of them: the African Export-Import Bank and the African Trade Insurance Agency. The request was considered by the Specialized Technical Committee on Finance, Monetary Affairs, Economic Integration, and Economic Planning in July last year in Lusaka. And in principle, the ministers agreed. A few technical issues were supposed to be looked at, and the champion for the African financial institutions, the president of this great country, was expected to make a decision, forward a decision to the Assembly. It's yet to be made, but we hope that in the very near future, that decision is going to be made. When we started developing the African continental free trade area, the question of payments and settlements came up. And we were approached by the African Export-Import Bank to facilitate the establishment of the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, PAPS. And we took the matter to the Association of African Central Banks, as well as the Specialized Technical Committee on Finance, Monetary Affairs, Economic Planning and Integration, and they approved. And in his speech, the president of the African Export-Import Bank highlighted how it is doing, and it's doing it very, very well. And later, there are going to be instruments where there will be accession by some central banks across Africa. And the journey continues. The president of this great country is the champion on the African Union financial institutions. And again, working with the finance ministers and working with the Association of African Central Banks, and based on a decision of the Assembly to embark on macroeconomic convergence across Africa. Work is underway to establish the African Monetary Institute with the support of the African Development Bank. When we have reached a good level of macroeconomic convergence, we'll be in a position to do two things. First, to establish the African Central Bank, and later, to establish a single African currency. And that work continues in the financial sector. In July last year, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the Association of Pan-African Stock Exchanges to create a Pan-African Stock Exchange. And with the support of the African Development Bank, work has started, and we hope that in the coming year, we should be able to roll out a virtual African stock market. And in addition, there are other financial institutions that are in the offing. One is the African Investment Bank. The other one is the African Monetary Fund. And the other one, which was recommended to the heads of state and government, and they accepted, is the African Financial Stability Mechanism. So against this background, I think it's very, very clear to all of us that the African Union is a friend and a great supporter of all the Pan-African financial institutions operating in Africa. And we look forward to deeper and broad relations with our sisters and brothers in the Caribbean. I was in Barbados last year when we had the inaugural trade and investment meeting there. And there was huge passion, great excitement, and great aspiration to develop the relations between the Caribbean and Africa. The African Export-Import Bank has pioneered by coming up with financing arrangements and institutions in the Caribbean. Efforts are underway to develop transport and communication linkages. And work is underway through the International Trade Center to do a mapping exercise on value chains between Africa and the Caribbean. All those are indications of moving forward. But above all, CARICOM is ready for a free trade agreement with Africa. However, we on the African continent still have to go into deeper economic integration. From the African Continental Free Trade Area, we need to move the African Customs Union for common market so that we have got a common external tariff. And when we do that, we are going to be able to enter into a free trade agreement between Africa and the Caribbean. I'll conclude by saying, on behalf of the chairman of the African Union, His Excellency the President of the Union of the Comoros, and on behalf of the chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Dr. Musa Faki Mohammed, I convey the warm congratulations of the African Union system for the 30 years of existence of the African Export-Import Bank. You started young, you are growing, and your ambitions are very huge. It took you 30 years to be around 30 billion, and you want to do it in 60 years. The sprint is possible. We encourage you to do it. Thank you very much. I end here.
Your Excellencies, dignitaries, the Dean and members of the Diplomatic Corps, fellow Africans, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to Accra, the vibrant capital of Ghana, and to the 30th Annual General Meeting of the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank. Akwaba is our word of welcome, especially to those who are visiting our country for the first time. You are amongst the people who pride themselves on their sense of hospitality, and it is my hope that by the end of your visit, you will agree with this claim. This year's edition of the bank's annual meetings is particularly special for us in Ghana, for the bank, and indeed for the continent. In fact, I should say for the world, looking at the amazing audience here with us. Some of you have come from different continents, including from the Caribbean and the Americas, making the 30th annual meeting of the bank a truly intercontinental event, indeed, a veritable global African event. I thank the leadership of the bank, particularly its current president, Professor Benedict Orama, for operationalizing this Pan-Africanist vision. Several countries in the Caribbean have become full members of the bank by signing and ratifying the Partnership and Participation Agreement. By increasing trade flows on both sides of the Atlantic, we're moving away from the rhetoric that has characterized the relations between our kith and kin in the African diaspora to creating and sustaining a dynamic relationship between communities and peoples who are united by a shared history and culture. It is very heartening to to see so many personalities from the Caribbean crossing the Atlantic to be with us in Accra for this anniversary. This recalls the spirit of the Year of Return that I launched in 2019, which saw hundreds of thousands of the African diaspora family from the Americas and the Caribbean coming back home to Ghana to renew their blood, cultural, and historic ties. One of the most prominent of such returnees was the Prime Minister of the Government of the Republic of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, QC. Who came to Ghana to pay an official visit in that memorable year at my invitation, a visit which was a spectacular success. Widely acknowledged as one of the outstanding figures of contemporary Caribbean politics, she is a great champion of the African peoples, and I'm delighted that she has returned to Accra for this conference. Her presence and that of her other colleagues give our gathering a truly global African coloring. We welcome equally heartily one of those colleagues, another prominent Caribbean leader, the Honorable Dr. Ralph Everard Gonzalez, Prime Minister of the Government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and another such staunch defender of the African cause to Ghana. We're glad also that the Honorable Philip Davis, Prime Minister of the Government of the beautiful island nation of the Bahamas, and the Chair of CARICOM, is also here with us. In addition to leaders from the Caribbean, who share their perspectives on productive engagement for shared prosperity among Africans at a time of geopolitical realignment, we have with us Dr. Julius Garvey, the son of the iconic Pan-Africanist, the first true organizer of the movement of the black people, that is all people of African descent, back to Africa to create the African Republic, Marcus Garvey. On behalf of all black people the world over, I would want to thank him for what he has done and continues to do to sustain the towering legacy of his father over the years. We appreciate too very much the solidarity and presence of current and former leaders on the continent. His Excellency Emmerson Mnangagwa, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Ghana's official in-law, His Excellency Dr. Lazarus Chakwera, President of the Republic of Malawi, His Excellency Dr. Patrice Trovoada, Prime Minister of the Government of the Democratic Republic of Sao Tome and Principe, His Excellency Chief Olusegun Baba, I should add Obasanjo as well. The former President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Mahamadou Issoufou, the former President of the Republic of Niger, and the architect of the African Free Trade, Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn, former Prime Minister of the Government of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. This event is also very special because it is the 30th anniversary celebration of the founding of the bank, whose first financial transaction was a Ghanaian one, the Ghana Cocoa Board transaction, which is now displayed in the bank's corporate museum in Cairo. I applaud Christopher Edodu, Jean-Louis Ikra, and the third and current president, Professor Benedict Orama, for what they have done over the years in establishing a very strong bank. But Afreximbank is not just a great African institution committed to history, but it is all very committed to the development of our continent and of countries in the African diaspora. The pillars of its sixth strategic plan currently under implementation, that is intra-African trade and AFCFTA implementation, as well as industrialization and export diversification, are perfect illustration. They are aligned with the aims of the AFCFTA and the African Union Agenda 2063 and reflect both the agility and relevance of the institution, which over the years has become one of the most systemically relevant financial institutions on the continent, with a wide range of products, a growing balance sheet, and a continental footprint, as Professor Orama so brilliantly articulated in his opening statement. And I can comfortably and convincingly say this, as the AU champion for African financial institutions and leader of a country which recently had to deal with one of the most difficult periods in its post-independent history, difficulties which were exacerbated by the reckless behavior of rating agencies that engaged in pro-cyclical downgrades, shutting Ghana out of capital markets and turning a liquidity crisis into a solvency crisis. Afreximbank, under its counter-cyclical response mechanism, provided timely support to help Ghana navigate the macroeconomic management challenges worsened by Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine in an orderly manner, when suddenly we realized we were alone. The country which had become, quote, the favorite child of bondholders and had successfully gone to market at the height of the pre-COVID-19 downturn was suddenly shut out of international capital markets. It is often said that you know who is truly your friend when you are in trouble, and is rightly stated by Dr. Martin Luther King in that often cited quote, "In the end, we'll remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends," unquote. When you're dealing with powerful international financial institutions, it is important to have your own powerful financial institution. And it is so important and significant that I'm here today, just a few months after that liquidity crisis, hosting the 30th anniversary celebration of Afreximbank. What I have just said about the great relationship between Afreximbank and Ghana, most of my colleagues in this room and across the continent and the Caribbean would say the same thing. What would have happened to the continent that was still heavily commodity dependent in 2015-2016, when what was called the commodity super cycle suddenly came to an abrupt end? When the same global financial institutions and international investors were exiting the continent en masse, weakening our currencies in the process, and further aggravating macroeconomic management challenges. Afreximbank quickly put together a counter-cyclical trade for liquidity facility to help member countries bridge the significant trade financing gap confronting them as a result of the adverse commodity terms of trade shocks. In the process, averting the cascade of trade payment defaults, which could have turned a liquidity crisis into a longer-lasting solvency and banking crisis. The $10 billion adjustment fund, which is being established by the bank in collaboration with the AFCFTA Secretariat to support countries to participate effectively in the AFCFTA, as well as the implementation of the Pan-African payments and settlement systems, which will help ensure that helpful financial mechanisms are in place to support intra-African trading, are positive steps that bode well for our rapid collective growth and development. What would have happened to the continent and to our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean after the outbreak of COVID-19, when most of us could not access either personal protective equipment or vaccines in a new and amazing world of vaccine nationalism? Working closely with the African Center for Disease Control, UNECA, and the AU envoy for COVID-19, Strive Masiyiwa, Afreximbank developed quickly the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust, AVAT, which through pooled procurement at the continental level suddenly turned us into a powerful force in the global marketplace that nobody could any longer ignore. More than saving lives, the development and effective operationalization of AVAT was a game-changing moment for the continent, or should I say for the Pan-Africanist revival, as it brought together Africa and the Caribbean in one of the most critical moments of their mutual history, where access to vaccines was the dividing line between life and death. Today, I dare say the power and commitment of one of the most relevant financial institutions in our continent put African lives before its bottom line and financial ratios. Again, I dare say the ravages of COVID-19, which brought us together in the face of rising vaccine nationalism, made us discover how important Afreximbank was to us as a continent and as a people with the same and common history. The continued growth of Afreximbank and development of Africa, again I should say of African countries around the world, have become so intertwined that the question is no longer what we should have done in the face of these major causes if Afreximbank had not been there. Instead, the key question for us gathered in Accra today is what should we be doing for Afreximbank to enable it to serve us even better and to help us navigate the challenges associated with the stickiness of the colonial development model of resource and extraction, globalization, and heightening geopolitical risks, which are likely to persist in the medium and long term. And here, I'd like to wear my hat of champion of the African Union financial institutions. Before I share my reflection on perspectives on the way forward in that capacity, I'd like to make one general assessment. In the past, we have created highly promising financial institutions just to abandon them before they could even stand on their own, let alone grow into global financial institutions. The reality is that unless we have strong financial institutions, we are not going to develop. As we have learned over the past decades, relying on foreign capital is both risky and costly. It has resulted in huge financial leakages through the high costs of default-driven borrowing rates and interest payments, and undermined the growth of our financial institutions, domestic resource mobilization, and private sector development through cost of funds. The ownership of our financial institutions should be strengthened over time to enhance continuously their development and relevance. Two interventions are important to strengthen the development impact and financial wherewithal of our development financial institutions. They are capital and effective coordination with the African Union. Regarding the first set of intervention, capital, I want to reiterate that despite consistent efforts made by many African governments, including during extremely difficult macroeconomic and global operating environments, our development finance institutions remain highly undercapitalized. Just to provide an illustration and order of magnitude, The Japan Bank for International Cooperation has a share capital of some 19 billion United States dollars. China Exim has a capital of 54 billion United States dollars, whereas Afreximbank has a capital of some 6 billion United States dollars, which excludes the most recent contribution by countries supporting the ongoing general capital increase. More importantly, we need to evaluate whether this 6 billion capital is sufficient to play that catalytic role of accelerating the creation of the market with a potential combined GDP of some 3.4 trillion United States dollars for our continent. Similarly, I implore the bank's management to work to develop and implement an aggressive strategy to upgrade the bank's current credit rating from BBB to A. This would require continued strengthening of your governance and management structure, as well as personnel. I thank the leaders of those countries and encourage those who have not yet contributed to the ongoing general increase to do so. Those who can afford should consider going beyond their allocated share. The bank has consistently paid dividends to its shareholders over the decades. As governments, our contribution to the capital of the bank is not only a good investment, but also the best way to support the development of our private sector by increasing access to and lowering the cost of funds to sustain private investment and economic growth. I believe that if we were able to gain greater control over the huge earnings that emanate from our extractive sectors and to plug the holes that permit significant outflows of illicit funds from the continent, we would be in a better position to assemble the monies necessary to strengthen the capital of Afreximbank. I am comforted by the array of expertise available to us. Now more than ever, it has become urgent to take the necessary steps to transition us towards becoming a resilient continent. Africa has to exploit her productive capabilities collectively and build the capacity of her continental development banks in order to realize the Africa we want and an Africa beyond aid. Accordingly, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, it is with great pleasure that I declare the 2023 edition of the Annual General Meetings of Afreximbank duly open.